From Unity of Houston, Texas, this is The Awakened Life with Reverend Howard Caesar. Unity is a non-denominational spiritual community providing a positive, practical, and progressive approach to Christianity. Let's join the service in progress now with Reverend Howard Caesar.
Emotions and feelings are obviously a part of life. We all have them, and they're all kinds as well. And there are the kinds of emotions and feelings that are wonderful, you know, that feel so good, pleasant, positive. Things like love and peace and joy and acceptance, faith, freedom, just oneness. I love to go to a movie that makes me cry in a good way. It just feels good to be taken to the heart and just feel the emotions come out in those good emotions. It would be great if those were the only emotions that we ever had, you know, or experienced. However, there are the kind of feelings and emotions also that cause commotion. And those are the kind that don't feel very good, and they're not all that pleasant. And we don't want to be in them, and we may push them away. You know, but there are things like fear and anger and resentment and anxiety and stress. It can even be hatred, guilt, grief, sadness, shame, regret, apathy. Should I go on? There are a lot of them, okay. Now, obviously, if we lived fully in all of those feelings and emotions that were only the positive emotions and feelings, then there'd be no reason for me to talk about this topic, all right? So obviously, not everyone does do that. We all have negative feelings to deal with. And for many people, they can dominate in their consciousness. Or it can be an experience of life where it seems like there's more of that is happening and going on than there is really of the love and the peace and the joy. More often there's the fear or the stress or the anxiety or anger or unhappiness or these kinds of things. And so there are those emotions and feelings that are of a high spiritual frequency. They bring lightness, and they bring a sense of freedom, and they bring not only lightness but brightness. And then there are those of a frequency that are somewhat heavy and dim and can be even dark of nature, expressing through us, that are distant and far removed from really the energies of the divine. In fact, there are people who can see auras, and I really believe that. There are people that have that ability, and they will tell you that they are seeing around you or an individual. They can see an aura of light, or they can see that there's sort of a cloud of darkness. And it really basically depends on where that person is in their consciousness at that moment in time. They may be going through a real difficult time, and they're really weighed down, and they're in fear, and they're in stress. And a person can see that there's like a dimness around that individual. And then other times a person can be just really charged with life and love, and they're on top of their game, and that frequency is moving through, and that's a radiance. You see, and it doesn't, and they can, you know, come and go, because that's the condition of life. And Jesus said that we, by design, are light, and that we are to be a light in the world. Okay, and then he taught us all the ways in which that light is able to come into expression, all the ways in which we can keep from blocking that light. And so he taught us that it's about love, it's about unconditional love, it's about forgiveness, it's about kindness, it's about truth, it's about freedom, it's about faith and peace and joy and oneness. That these principles he taught all the way through. And so we know that these states and vibrations and frequencies of consciousness exist. They exist. And that we are being called to express them. And so first and foremost, we have to believe that within ourselves they do exist, that they are achievable for me and for you, that it's possible. And it doesn't mean then that we don't have emotions that come and go that are somewhat unpleasant. It's just that we come to the place where we learn that they don't have to be permanent, they can be temporal, and they don't have to dominate in us. They don't rule over us. They don't control us. So there are some skills that we can learn as we monitor these different emotions. Now, Jesus, we have come to learn, experienced various emotions. We know that Jesus wept. We know that, or can assume that at least he was a little bit angry or perturbed when he was in the temple and turning over the tables. We can assume that. But I have never seen any evidence of any of the emotions like guilt or unforgiveness or resentment or fear. Understand that Jesus' whole message was in oneness and alignment with God. And in oneness with God, there really is only love. And its opposite is fear, and all of the things that fall under fear are basically all those other emotions of separation. And so everything that he said and taught, it was like, fear not, fear not, fear not. Even going to the cross was to say, fear not death, it's not what you think it is, all right? So everything was about taking and removing fear so that we could experience the peace of God, the joy of God, and then find room in our hearts thereby to be the love that we were created to be. And so perhaps Jesus had developed what even Aristotle, thousands of years ago, referred to as kind of a skill when he went to the temple, at least, and was flipping over the tables. What Aristotle said, this rare skill is to be angry with the right person, to the right degree, at the right time, for the right purpose, in the right way. So if you can do that, you can be angry, I guess, okay? But Jesus knew the truth. He knew the truth of who he was. That he was a son of God. And he knew who he was, which was a being of love. And so that was what was always emitting from him. And nothing would cross him up. It was not conditional. And that's why he was able to forgive in every instance. And so he was able to maintain that state and that frequency. And that's what we're called to. But we're still learning that. So cut yourself some slack. You know, we're in that process, and the whole gamut of emotions are going to run through us because that's the human condition, but we can learn from them. Our tendency when experiencing a lot of problems and unhappiness and when searching for solutions and answers to the various dilemmas of human life, we tend to first look outside of ourselves. That's just the human tendency, and that's part of our learning. We look outside of ourselves. I love some of the writings of David Hawkins, and in one of his books, he talks about all the places that we as humans look to experts and various other places outside ourselves for the answers to moving beyond our pain and our suffering, our unhappiness. And he made this long list, and I won't share all of it, but I found it humorous. Some of them, some of them might be, and they're not bad. We're all inclined to go these different directions. So, but I want to share this with you. You might see yourself in there. I saw myself. So to find your way to the answers, you take up religion. You go to a doctor, psychiatrist, analyst, astrologist. You take EST training. You get your chakras balanced. You try reflexology, acupuncture, iridology, chant a mantra, try the Pentecostals, speak in tongues. You study psychology, join a Jungian group, get Rolfed. You try psychedelics, you get a psychic reading. Have colonics, take aerobics, biofeedback, Gestalt therapy. You get your meridians balanced. You take tranquilizers. You get hormone shots. You become a vegetarian. You eat only cabbage. You try macrobiotics. You go organic. You do a sweat lodge. You go to India. You find a new guru. You swim in the Ganges, you get rebirthed. You do tarot cards, you study Zen. You work with a kahuna, you sit under a pyramid. You read Nostradamus, you try fasting. You join a mystery school, you try toning. You learn a secret handshake. You try color therapy, you try subliminal tapes, you take brain enzymes, you go to health spas. You hunt up holy men. You renounce sex and going to the movies. You get your palm read. You get an aura reading. You travel to Lourdes. You get blessed by Baba somebody. and you and you check out snake gallbladders, and the list goes on. I mean, I'm just reading a few of what he listed. It was amazing, and it was all kind of to humor you as a reader, but it basically makes the point that we just keep on searching. You know, and what drives us to keep on searching is that we are looking for an answer to our suffering or our pain or our unhappiness. But there is something else to that, and that is really intuitively we know that somewhere there are answers. We know there is an answer. We know that we don't always have to feel this way. And we can feel differently, and something instinctively and intuitively knows that. And so we do go into the search, and there's nothing wrong with that. And I'm not suggesting that the topic here today that we covered, that it's the end all, what I have here to share to the problems. But the key, or it really is what we're sharing about emotions and feelings today, or starting into at least today, is a key and an aid really to expanding our awareness and to transforming our lives. This is one big help. And the key is, first of all, to become in touch with your own inner feelings. You know, many of us are not. Most of us are not, only to some extent. Most guys are really not very good at it. We run from our feelings. We even want to be loved, but we run from love itself when it comes at us. There are all these different feelings that we just are not in our comfort zone about. And you have to admit to that and see that. Sometimes we have to go through our negative feelings, go through the deep, dark forest to eventually get to the clearing on the other side, which is the house of God, the kingdom, really, of who you really are. And so fear has always been there for thousands of years. And in our evolutionary journey, our history of thousands of years, our survival depended upon really an emotional repertoire for survival. And so some of these emotional reactions were actually imprinted upon our nervous systems, and they remained as almost automatic nervous tendencies or whatever. You know, but as we evolve now, we should be evolving and awakening spiritually, and so greater awareness and choice is required. And that's part of the path. Our researchers have discovered that there are very physiological details of how each emotion actually affects the body and prepares it for a different kind of a response. Like for anger, they found that it actually sends blood a lot to the hands, and making it easier from years past in our history for grabbing a weapon and protecting ourselves. The heart rate increases, there's a rush of hormones, adrenaline, a burst of energy, all of that from anger. And fear isn't too far from that. It's, you know, the blood goes to the large skeletal muscles, such as the legs, and allows you to better flee from danger. And there are circuits of the brain's emotional centers that are triggered, and they flood with hormones that put the body in greater alert. That's all through fear. And when a person is surprised, don't we all kind of lift our eyebrows? Ooh. You know, our eyebrows go up when we're surprised. And actually, they go up automatically, which is actually for a larger visual sweep, you know, and it permits more light to strike the retina, and it offers you more information about the unexpected event that you just got surprised with. And it was, again, much about survival. And so we still have that tendency to have our eyebrows go up. What? What? And all of a sudden we're taking it all in quicker, you know? And even disgust is kind of typical. It sends the message of something being offensive. And so this can be offensive to taste or to smell. And so what happens is there's a facial expression that goes with disgust. The upper lip curls, you know, to the side, and the nose kind of wrinkles. And it's a goofy look, right? If I'm on TV, forgive me, people, but it's like this. And Darwin, you know, he suggests that this was a primordial attempt to close the nostrils against offensive, obnoxious odor, and also to spit out poisonous food. That's sort of was the next step. But as we evolved, you know, the pressures that had made our emotional responses important for survival, they waned. They don't fit anymore. We don't need many of these things, but they're there. Aristotle, you know, spoke to this, and what he said, kind of paraphrasing, he said, what is wanted is appropriate emotion, feeling proportionate to circumstances. When muted, they create dullness and distance. When out of control, they become pathological and overwhelming. So we don't want to do away with feelings, but we want to also not allow them to be overwhelming as well. So what we're really wanting to attain is a certain level of emotional intelligence or emotional awareness. And awareness, we have tended to think, is all about really one's thoughts, and kind of singled it down the lane of the mind alone. It's true, you know, we need to look at our thoughts, our beliefs, our opinions, our attitudes, and those aspects of the mind. But we should not rule out the importance and the significance to be in touch with our feelings and our emotions. You know, it's learning to recognize feeling in us as it's happening, And it is to experience it, it's to not run from it, it's not to push it aside, to push it away, it's not to judge ourselves, not to condemn ourselves, or another actually, for feeling feelings, in at least in an appropriate way. And so an important step is to acknowledge that we have negative feelings, and not to blame ourselves, and to realize that they are part of the human condition. They are there. And then be willing to look at them, and without judgment. They're just feelings. And so we all have a small self. We all have an ego self. We have a separate self, if you will. We also have a larger self. You know, the great self is calling us to live the truth and step into our true self. But by being honest with ourselves, we have to admit that we have this small self, and in admitting it, then we're able to transcend it. See, we have to understand that there is the truth of who we are. God created us to be this great self inside. But then you and I have hidden it and covered over it and created a separate self. And the separate self, you know, is the one that is full of all of these emotions that are erroneous and untrue of the true nature of a child of God. And so that's the process, is acknowledging that ego, small, separate self, and seeing its ways and tendencies, and not denying it, but then beginning to notice and then transcend it. Very, very important. So the small self is not who we are. But to attain true freedom, we have to be able to objectively watch our problems and feelings instead of being lost in them. Okay? And we have to get beyond the habit of thinking that the solution to our problem is to rearrange things external to us on the outside. The only permanent solution to our problems and our pain and our unhappiness is to go inside, to let go of the part of us that is invested in the pain and the problems. All the great teachers have told us that all down through time. Just look at what the Dalai Lama said to start. You know, he said, inner disarmament first, then outer disarmament. He says that's the path and the journey. Inner disarmament, that means in you first. Gandhi said, be the change you want to see in the world, talking about start with you. Jesus said, don't be a hypocrite. Cast out the beam that is in your own eye first, and then you shall see clearly to see whether there's a speck or not in your brother's eye. All about starting first with ourselves. Spiritual growth can sometimes be about what we need to undo and unlearn, you know? So there are ways in which we handle feelings that we need to unlearn. And the most common ways that we deal with emotions and feelings is suppression, repression, escape, and expression. Suppression, repression, escape, and expression. Like I said, we're afraid to face our feelings, many of us, to feel them. Fear, anger, sadness, whatever. And so we carry this huge reservoir of accumulated negative energy and feelings inside of us, in the unconscious. It's trying to find its way up to the surface and be released. And that is part of our growth. Suppression is one of the most common things that people do, which is to push feelings down, push it away. And they're afraid to experience them, or they don't know what to do with these feelings. They just are foreign to them or whatever. They don't feel safe with them. whatever the mind does. But in suppression, we do it consciously. In other words, we feel the feeling enough to know we don't want it, or we're not comfortable with it, and then we push it aside. Repression, you aren't even conscious of it. You've pushed it down so much that you don't even go to feeling it. It goes right into denial and projection. All right? That is repression. And then there's escape, and our mind has lots of diversions as to how to escape feelings, you know, basically excessive anything, excessive alcohol, drugs, excessive work, excessive sleep, excessive TV, excessive computer, excessive whatever. We're basically saying, I don't want to feel. When it's excessive, we're not living. All relationships suffer when we are into serious suppression, repression, and escape. And not just our relationships with people, but our relationships with life. We're not feeling life. We're not experiencing life. Because experiencing is feeling. And if you don't feel what's not good, you're not going to feel what's good. So then we talk about expression. We said suppression, repression, escape. What about expression? Well, you know, some people think that expression and expressing their negative feelings frees them from them. Actually, it is said that the expression of a feeling tends to propagate that feeling and actually give it greater energy, and then allows the remainder to be suppressed out of one's awareness. So it's interesting. So there is a way to talk about it or to feel your way through it, but not to dump, okay, inappropriately. And so let me give you an example. We all have our moments, and I'll give you a personal one. If you try not to judge me now. This past Christmas, it was 5 or so days before Christmas, and I was very busy as a minister, lots of things to do. My grandchildren had come early along with their parents, so it was 5 or 6 days before Christmas, and we had selected a morning. I carved out a couple hours from the office at home to go to see Santa at the mall. So it was pouring down rain, so I backed my car out of the driveway and put it in and parked it in front. Now, at our home association, there's a rule: you cannot park your car on the street or it'll be towed. And so I pulled my car out and parked it, and I ran through the rain to get to Highlander, which can seat 8 people, and we could all go together to the mall. And so we got in it, and we're pulling it out, and I thought, well, there's my car. Do I jump out in the rain and put it back in the driveway? I thought, we're only going to be 2 hours away, and you know, I should be safe. Well, we came back from the mall, and my car was gone. And I didn't handle it well. You're a spiritual champion here. You fell off the horse. And so I really got angry. And so I didn't know what to do, where to go. They leave you no card, no nothing. Your car's just gone. And so I started calling, and I called the home association, and I spoke to the manager, and expressed under uncertain terms how unhappy I was about this. And I said, you know, I pleaded my case. It was raining, you know, and it's Christmas. And I said, you know, I believe in this rule, and I've abided by it, and you should have it in place, but for 5 to 7 days around Christmas, when relatives and everybody are coming in, we shouldn't have it. So I said, call off the dogs during Christmas, you know, and I didn't have a very good tone, and then I went and paid $250 to get my car back. It was a 45-minute drive there and a 45-minute back, and I was busy, and I was preparing for a memorial. I had all this kind of stress building, and anyway, so I wasn't happy with the tone of my communication to these people. And from there, you see, expressing doesn't get it done, because it just made me irritable that I had fallen to that. Then I went into guilt, and then the guilt was with me for a couple days, and then my mind was, you know, and it was just with me, because, you know, people experience whatever. When you're angry and dumped like that, it's an attack of one kind or another. You don't make any friends. And then we rationalize, we're a victim. You know, we have this story we build up in our mind, well, it was raining, and it was only for 2 hours, but no, if you really own the feelings and give yourself time to just feel your way through the feeling, it's like, no, I broke the rule. You know, I feel angry. I feel this was unjust, but that's just my mind. You know, I need to feel my way through this and break that up, and and I'll feel much better. The way to neutralize and let go of negative feelings is basically first become aware of the feeling, let it come up, then stay with it. Stay with it. Let it run its course. Don't let your mind take you away into victimhood. And let out the energy of it. And once you let the energy out and stay with then you come to your sanity. You know, you do. You get clarity, and you allow yourself to have the feeling without resisting it or making it wrong or whatever. So this is good for parenting too, because you know my daughter, I've observed her. We have 2 grandchildren, and one was at Christmas time was 5, and the other was 3. And so the 3-year-old will always mess with what the 5-year-old is doing and upset him. So the 3-year-old is a little girl, and the 5-year-old is a boy, Brady and Dylan. And so anyway, I've observed several times where Dylan will, you know, mess up something that Brady is building, and then he'll start crying, and you know, she toppled the thing and I was making it. It was so good, and she turned, you know. And so my daughter, you know, and sometimes in parenting we'll say, stop it, or we'll want them to stop the emotion. But I observed, she must have learned this from me. I was really impressed. She would pause and calmly go and say, come on, let's talk about it. You know, what are you feeling? And she would, instead of making him wrong, she would take him to describing the feeling, so that he was able to connote what it was. And then she would take him through it and say, yeah, that doesn't feel very good, does it? If he didn't know what it was, she may offer, are you feeling angry? Or are you feeling sad? And he said, yeah. And so he was learning to look at his emotions and make his way through them. And she'd say, well, that wasn't very nice, was it? But you can go back and you would take it to a positive thought. And that's what it's really, really about. You know, we all have an inner being. 2 aspects of it are, the first is that there is you and your awareness, you as a witness, you as self-observer. And then the second aspect of your inner being is that which you get to watch, okay? So feelings come and go, and eventually we realize that we are not our feelings, and that our feelings are basically our gurus. They're communicating to us a truth or an error. They feel great if it's the truth. If it's an error, they don't feel very good inside of us. And if they don't feel very good inside of us, the next thing is to go to a thought, a corrective thought, after we feel the feeling, you see, because our bodies really can't create, they can only communicate. Thinking is what creates. So the corrective behavior is in thought, but the communication can come from our feelings as to whether we're in alignment or out of alignment, in truth or out of truth, with a lie or with an error. And so that's so vital and important. So realize that all feelings fully felt lead to the feelings of love. And love is what we are. God is love. Love is God. And the goal is to clear everything so that you go to your heart and be the love you were created to be. That's a process. We'll talk more about it next week. God bless you all.
Thank you for joining us for today's message. We invite you to be with us again next Sunday. Unity is inclusive, welcoming people of all walks of life in dignity and love. We believe that love, strength, and goodness dwells within you. May we all live in unity with God, humanity, and all of God's creation. And remember, as Reverend Caesar says, life is meant to be good.